Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all having a very, very pleasant evening. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your busy Mondays to come and join me to talk about the Classroom Management Black Belt course. I see you. Yes, I see you. I see you. Okay. The comments are starting to roll in. So that's absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much. So, what are we here to discuss, ladies, gentlemen, and people? So I've taken the privilege, or I have been honored by all the replies that have been sent to me, and I'm going to answer your questions. But for those who don't know me, I thought I'll do a bit of an introduction because I'm aware that there's some people in cyberspace who doesn't know who this very charming and handsome young man is. So I am going to introduce myself, and I'm going to introduce the course. So who am I? And what's it all about? A little bit about me. So my name is Carl C. Poupe, FRSA, and I've been in education for a while now. So I've been in education for 15 years, and I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm starting to get the grays in the beard. So I'm starting to get my grays in my beard. So I've been in education for 15 years. And honestly, being in education has been the greatest privilege of my life. When I started I started off as, in fact, I didn't even start off as a teacher. Teaching was never on the radar. I started off as a youth mentor. So I was one of the people that, came in and spoke to the youth and started mentoring them and telling them they can do better. And in fact, when I started doing it, it was not known as SEMH. All right. So I was working with very vulnerable children with very complex needs, and it was known as emotional behavioral difficulties, which is really interesting. And I'm glad they updated it and changed it. So off the back of that, I really enjoyed it. And I started to gain my teaching qualifications. And then one of the highlights of my career was that I became a NEETs coordinator. So what is a NEET? A NEET is a young person who's not in education, employment, or training. And what I had to do, so I used this experience, and eventually in mainstream schooling, I became an alternative provision lead, which is basically the same thing. And what I had to do was what I was responsible for was devising a scheme of work, or devising a course to keep these young people from doing antisocial behavior. So what tended to happen when there was an alternative provision is that these young people were excluded from one or more mainstream settings, and they ended up in alternative provision. So that's where me and my team would help them. So what it was that a lot of these young people, the statistics were very bleak. And I worked in East London in a place called the Isle of Dogs. Now, any of you who are familiar with the show Top Boy, which has ended last year, I believe, the actual estate which Top Boy was filmed on was just literally round the corner. It was round the corner from where I used to work. And when I was working there in East London, so the Isle of Dogs is based in East London in a borough called Tower Hamlets. And when I was there working there, it was at the height of what is known as the postcode wars. So a quarter of all acid attacks took place in the borough. So I received some very extensive training on how to deal with. So I had a lot of help from people like CAMS, Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, for the yacht team, which is basically the Metropolitan Police's initiative. So youth offending team to stop offending, especially when you're dealing with vulnerable young people. And there were many other, we were constantly getting trained by educational psychologists, and we had speakers coming in talking about country lines. So I got a whole wealth of information to be able to help these young people. And the antisocial behavior that these young people were getting involved with was all the things that you see on the news, unfortunately. So we're talking about being a victim or a perpetrator of violent crime, knife crime, acid attacks, as I mentioned, country lines, prostitution, and the whole works. And there were some really harrowing stories. But unfortunately, that was one of the greatest jobs I ever did. I did that for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. But unfortunately, because of the wisdom of our wonderful ex-government, should I say now, it's like, coming out of a very abusive relationship with these governments, but the ex-government, all of that got cut. So I went into my workplace, and they just said to me, Carl, we've run out of funding and you've got 3 months until you can find yourself another job. And unfortunately, I remember I did say to a lot of my colleagues that as we were walking out of the center for the last time, that there's going to be blood on the streets. So there was a whole narrative saying, oh, what do youth centers do? And what do these alternative provision centers do? They don't do anything. That is a whole stream of baloney, unfortunately. We do a lot. And unfortunately, because it was cut down to the bone, we have seen what happens on our streets. And the saving grace of COVID, or the silver lining when we were talking about COVID, was in that time when we were all locked down, the crime stopped, but unfortunately it's starting to rise again. So I did that for a little while. So when I went into mainstream schooling after I had my experience in alternative provision, because they cut all the funding and I went to be a normal teacher, I had a whole wealth of experiences that I realized my mainstream colleagues did not have. So, you know, I used to do a lot of behavior management, and people would say, Carl, you're really good at this. And how do you get to do this? And how do you get to do that? And also I come from a sales background as well. So I remember that I had to kind of refine these techniques. Forgive my dog. He likes to go absolutely nuts at this time of night. I swear that dog is part wolf. I haven't confirmed it. I think the dog is part wolf. Okay. Because every time during the night, he just goes mad. Or she, I don't know. Anyway, so what was I saying? So I had a lot of different techniques that I learned from my time on alternative provision. And also I had a lot of techniques that I learned from sales. So I kind of had this hodgepodge of different techniques to be able to talk to and you know, engage the more difficult learners. So I thought to myself, because people kept on, you know, asking me questions and saying, you know, how do you do this? How do you do that? I thought to myself, why don't I just write a book? So in 2018, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to write a book, and it became known as the Action Hero Teacher Classroom Management Made Simple. Didn't have any publishers, didn't have any razzmatazz, didn't have any PR, anything like that. It was just me. And at the time I had a new baby. So when the baby was keeping us up at night, I thought, let me use my sleeplessness to good measure. And I started writing the book. So a year later in 2019, which was, I think, in the 11th of March, 2019, I released the book with no fanfare. Any of you guys that follow me on social media, I always tell this story. I sold 10 books in my first day. I sold 35 books for the whole year. I had a cousin that said to me, Carl, why did you write this? No one wants to read this book. I was like, oh my gosh, it was a waste of time. And I swear, between November to February of that year, so November 2019 to February 2020, I sold 0 books. So it was an absolute, if you looked at it from that snapshot, it was an absolute failure. But because of lockdown and meeting a lot of interesting people and wonderful people, the buzz started to build about the book, and eventually it became an award-winning book. I released the second one, The Action Era Teachers of the Lost Class, in 2022. And I started from that point doing consultancy and helping thousands of teachers up and down the country. And then I made the leap in 2022 to become a full-time consultant. And in 2021, what I'm really, really, really proud of was I was awarded a fellowship in the Royal Society of Arts, Commerce and Manufacture. In fact, funny story, when I first got the email, I thought it was some form of spam. So basically, let me explain what the FRSA is. So the FRSA is a think tank. Thank you, Prince. I appreciate that, man. Love. Thank you for joining me. So in fact, you know what? These live streams, I've got to do it like, you know, the young people do. Yeah, big up this one, big up that one. So yes, thank you so much, Natalie, for jumping on. Prince, I appreciate that. Love. Thank you very much. So the fellowship. So what is the FRSA, or what is the RSA? So the Royal Society of Arts is basically like a think tank. It's a think tank which was made or it was founded about 200 years ago, and it was developed to basically make the world a better place. So they wanted to create a place where you can get the top activists, lawyers, artists, you name it, politicians, everybody to come together to come up with solutions in order to make the world a better place. So previous fellows included Sir Stephen Hawking, Charles Dickens, Karl Marx, Benjamin Franklin. So when I got the email, I honestly thought to myself, this must be some form of spam. This must be, you know, when you get those emails where it says, oh, there's a prince from a faraway country and, you know, give me $1,000 and I'll go back and I'll help my family. I thought it was one of those ones. I thought, yeah, it's a spam. They emailed me a couple of times and I said, look, stop emailing me. And I rung them up and they said, yeah, this is real. This is absolutely real. And I was like, oh my gosh. And if you saw me, well, I was very, very proud because, you know, East London boy, I'm an East Londoner from a place called Barking, you know what I mean? And it's not the nicest place to live. I would have never in my wildest dreams thought I would ever get any form of royal fellowship or title or anything like that. So that was all the course of the doing the action hero teacher. Okay, so let's talk about the man of the hour, the person of the hour, the course of the hour, rather. So, what is the Classroom Management Black Belt course? All right. So, as you know, as I've explained, I started the Action Hero Teacher 5 years ago, and I've had the honor and privilege to travel up and down the country to be able to consult and help schools, universities, you name it. So, I've worked with people like the University of Essex, their teachers. I've worked with the NEU, the National Education Union, the National College, which is an online course provider. I have worked with Now Teach, which is another fantastic provider, help especially for older teachers or teachers 40 plus and over. And there's some others that have skipped my brain, but I've worked with a lot of organizations and schools and individuals, and the same questions kept on coming up all the time. They were saying, Carl, this is fantastic, this is great, but how do I sustain it? How do I, it's great that you come in and you tell us, and, I've done one-to-one coaching, but it's like, how do I sustain this? Because I don't know if I'm doing this right or doing that right. And I don't know if I can get you in or keep on, get bothering you to call you. So this was a problem that started to bug me a lot. So I thought to myself, how can I basically digitize myself? How can I become like a digital genie and put myself, at the whim and beck and call of all of you? And this is where the Classroom Management Black Belt course is. So what my design with this particular course is, and this is part of a series, this is the first one, was that I wanted to basically squeeze all my 15 years of experience, all right, all my 15 years of experience, my 5 years of consultancy, my fellowship, my Royal Fellowship, and condense it down into a course to give you the items or to give you the skills and techniques that you can walk into literally any single classroom and be able to engage any learner and engage any student. And that's why I called it the Black Belt course. I used to do martial arts when I was a young man. Unfortunately, I lost my six-pack and everything, but one of my heroes let me not embarrass myself. The six-pack is there. It's there. I just have to find it. That's all. So one of my heroes was like, I used to watch, people like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. What I loved was, apart from the martial arts, they was just so confident. They can walk into any situation and handle any situation. And sometimes it wasn't, it didn't have to have a violent confrontation, but it's the confidence that they carried within themselves. And when I saw my masters and my teachers and the confidence that they had to be able to, handle situations, that's what I want teachers to have. I want them to have that same confidence when they walk into a lot of classrooms. Because unfortunately, especially when we're talking to ECTs and other new teachers, is kind of, they always say to me, it's like, Carl, I've got the curriculum down. I know my subject, whether it's history or maths, or when I work in primary schools, I know how to be able to do everything. But it's just, I'm really nervous about classroom management, and I just want to have that confidence. And this is what I designed that course to do. Okay. So what you get with this course is a 2-hour course, which I've released. I've put all the links into LinkedIn and everywhere and on my website. What you get is you basically get all those things that I've spoken about. So I think on the next slide, no, I haven't put it on the next slide. I'll just tell you. So there's 3 pillars in terms of the way that I've designed this course. And I really spent a long time thinking about this. Part 1 is you get the information. So information is really important. So you will get, in this particular course, 3 core skills that you can use. And I would say, honestly, if you learn and master these 3 core skills, you'll be able to deal with 90% of the classroom management. In fact, I'll even say, if I've done my job correctly, you won't even need levels 2 and levels 3. Level 1 could be enough. So you're going to get information on 3 core communication skills to be able to engage. So it'll help you to build rapport really quickly, to encourage and motivate, and to de-escalate situations. So these are 3 core skills that I use to this day. All right. The next part on the next pillar. So number 1 is the information. Number 2 is you're going to get an extensive case study based on a real life scenario or real life situation, which it's a real life situation that I had when I was a needs coordinator. Of course, I've changed names and situations so people can't identify themselves. But these were real life scenarios and situations. And what I will get you to do in the actual course when you take the course is I'll get you to use the skills that you've learned and apply it to this case study. So you'll be given a scenario, you'll be given a certain amount of time to be able to do it. And we'll talk about how we can use all these different skills together. Now, what's really important to understand, very similar to martial arts, and that's why I called it the black belt course, is that when you see a true martial artist or you see somebody who's a master, whether it's at chess or football or public speaking, you name it, they can use different techniques concurrently. They can use it all at the same time. And that's what I try and build in within you. How can you use these as combinations? How can you use these particular skills to help the young person? So that's what we do with the part 2, which is the case study. Part 3, which is really interesting, is that we want to embed that practice. I don't want to just give you the skills, you practice them for one day and then you forget. So what I've designed in part 3, which is the practice section or the study section, is I've given you a study plan that will have 3 things within it. Number 1, reflections. So I want you to think about if you're teaching, who are the difficult classes that you're teaching? Who are the tricky students that you teach? And I want you to reflect on, why do you think that is? What are you doing? What are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? Sometimes you could be doing something, great, but you just need to tweak it. So I want you to reflect. Then I'll give you some exercises that you can actually practice within your class, and I'll give you some tips and tricks to be able to initiate them and really break it down. And then the third part is what I call the tweaks or the tips. So after you've done the exercises, this section you come back to, this is the section you'll come back to know if you're doing it right. So if, for example, you're doing something and I asked you to do, I don't know, pain stacking, which is one of the things I talk about, and pleasure stacking, okay? And you're saying, is it right or is it wrong? You go to the tip section and then I'll kind of break down what this looks like, all right? So that is what it's all about. So once you do that, that's the study section I intended. So basically you've got 3 skills and I've planned it for a month for you. So within a month, you'll be able to do deliberate practice on those particular skills. And hopefully within a month after watching the course, you'll become a classroom management black belt. And I've done some testing with some other people and they've loved the concept. And, if you just go into the course and take the 3 techniques by itself, all right? So you learn the 3 techniques and you think, oh, well, I've done great, mate. I've done great. You've only paid for, or you've only used 1/3 of the course. If you go through the whole thing, I promise you, you will come out on the other side with more knowledge than 90% of the other teachers, all right? Or 90% of your peers, and it will make a difference. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been coaching or consulting for 5 years. I've been coaching so many teachers, and these are the top tips I always give them. So I know that they're effective. So that's what the course is all about. So I hope you enjoy it. The links are all in over my LinkedIn. So you can just jump in, take a look at the course and, enjoy it. And feel free to ask me any questions during the live about it, or feel free to message me after. I don't mind. It's all good. Just do it, as they say, as Nike says. So let's jump into the questions. So what I did was, for those who don't know, I've also got a newsletter called Teach Outside the Robot. And again, all the links are on my LinkedIn profile. And basically, it's classroom management. So every 2 weeks, I'll give you a newsletter that you can read in 5 minutes or less. And I'll give you the top tips and tricks for classroom management for the AI generation, for the social media generation. So I will talk about, all the stuff you can do in the classroom, but also talk about the things that are affecting society, such as technology, social media. All right. So this, this is really topical. And it's really fun. I really enjoy writing it. So I've got almost 1,000 subscribers on there. So what I did a couple of weeks ago was I said, because I was planning for this event, I wanted to ask the people out there. I wanted to ask my subscribers, what have been the 3 biggest challenges or the classroom challenges? All right. So, or I asked my subscribers, 3 questions. So one of them was, what is your biggest challenges? So let's just go through it. Read the script, Carl. Read the script. So I'll ask 3 questions. Number 1. What have been your biggest classroom management struggles so far? Okay. What classroom management techniques would you like to learn about? And what would make your life easier when dealing with challenging behavior? All right. So these were the 3 questions. I surveyed almost 1,000 subscribers to ask them how they felt about these things. And I got some really interesting answers. Now, for brevity and time, I selected the answers which I knew I could answer in the time allotted to me because I'm a respecter of time. You've got dinner to cook. You've got ironing to do. You have got Netflix TV shows to watch. So I didn't want to be here for 3 hours, but I'll pick the best questions. And there was a lot of overlap anyway. So let's go through them. And of course, if you have got questions, if you're on the live right now and you have got questions, please, by all means, post a comment, all right, and ask me those questions, and I will answer them to the best of my ability live for you, all right? So we've got around 40 minutes, if my clock is not deceiving me. So I'm going to start off with these questions, and then if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me. So this was one of the responses. So what has been the biggest classroom management struggle so far? Low level disruption and chatting. Oh, you've got to love low level disruption. You've got to love it. So what I classify low level disruption as, so in my 2 books, Action Hero Teacher 1 and Action Hero Teacher 2, low level disruption is any form of disruption or activity which basically adds friction to the lesson. It slows your lesson down. It slows teaching and learning down. So it's not what I call a flashpoint situation where they're kicking off and swearing and throwing chairs at you. No, that's not what it is. Okay. It's just the constant irritating things that some of the young people do, which are annoying. You know, I call these, you know, these disruptive children, the can yous, not Kanye, because Kanye is very naughty, very, very naughty. Okay, the can yous. Can you take off your jacket? Can you stop talking? Can you do this? Can you? And then you feel like ripping out your hair. Now, I'm focally challenged at the moment, or follically challenged at the moment. I think the hair that used to be on my head has just gone down into my beard, but hey ho, it's one of those things. So how would you deal with low level disruption and chatting? That is very, very simple. Very, very, very simple. This one is the simplest one to answer out of the lot. The best way to deal with it is if you join up with my newsletter, Teach Outside the Robot. I have, as a reward for any subscribers that join up, a 40-minute webinar called the Low Level Disruption Toolkit. Okay, so I've done a free 40-minute webinar based on a talk I did with some ECTs talking about this, where I talk about free techniques. Again, I love free. Free is a lovely number, especially when there's no money attached to it. But I talk about the number free techniques that you can use to stop low-level disruption, and they're very, very effective. So if you want that toolkit, it's very, very simple. If you go either to my website or you go onto my LinkedIn, you will find, in fact, probably the best thing to do is to go onto my website because it's right at the top. Join the Teach Outside the Robot newsletter, and within, I would say 10 to 15 minutes, once you've signed on, you will get that link to that free webinar, and I will go through all of my favorite techniques with you. So that's a very easy one to answer. So thank you very much, whoever sent that. There's no names attached, so don't feel hurt if I don't mention your name because you didn't leave a name. And I didn't ask for one, which is a key thing. I didn't ask for one. So that is the first question. So go onto the website, sign up to Teach Outside the Robot. You will get yourself a free toolkit. Also, just to let you know, if you are one of the subscribers of Teach Outside the Robot, the last newsletter I sent, which was, so I forgot to mention, I send these newsletters every second Thursday. Okay, so you get 2 newsletters per month in your mailbox, fresh, 5 minutes to read, all that stuff. So if you are a subscriber, you would have got it in the last newsletter, which was last Thursday. All right, so don't worry, I've got you covered as well. All right, so that's an easy one to answer. Number 2. Now, this one was quite an extensive one, and I wanted to take my time to dissect this one. So let's just read it out. Let's read it out. So this is what the person said to me. The person said, as a cover supervisor, at times I find myself in highly disruptive classes. I mean, they don't listen to the instructions, keep talking, laughing, walking around. They don't care about your warnings. Basically, I feel like I lose control of pupils' behavior. Please don't say the usual cliches. Set up rules at the start. We're talking about real life. I love that. If I had a pen and paper, I would have underlined that. We're talking about real life. So when you come in the class, when you come in the class is already, so when you come into the class which is already disruptive, I presume, and the IT system doesn't work, or the volume of the video doesn't work, or the cover work hasn't been set up, and things like that. I want to learn to gain control of these situations. How do you deal with learners who do not want to learn or do not care at all? Is it even possible? So first things first, whoever sent that to me, hopefully you'll listen to this or you'll listen to the playback. Number one, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm really, really sorry to hear that you're going through that. Now, this is one thing which is a pet peeve of mine, that supply teachers and cover teachers, unfortunately, do not get set up to do their jobs correctly. Okay. I've done supply teaching, and it is a tough old gig. Okay, especially as this cover supervisor or supply teacher mentioned, if all the stuff is not working, and they literally give you a folder and they shove it in your hand and say, here you go, and you've got no work and you've got 30 kids. And what I shouldn't laugh, but I remember when I used to be a supply teacher, as soon as they saw me, they go, bruv, it's a supply, it's a supply. Man, it's easy lesson, no work today. How are you gonna how are you gonna deal with that? That you're walking uphill. It's kind of like Man City versus Arsenal. Arsenal are 10 men down. You've got one of the best strikers in the world against you. You're just going uphill, man. You're skating uphill. I wish I had this course when I started my teaching journey. Thank you very much, Natalie. I appreciate that. It is a tough old gig. So first of all, I want to say I'm sorry that you've gone through that. And to be honest with you, a lot more can be done. So hopefully the NEU, National Education Union, they're really good. So what I'll say to this cover supervisor or supply teacher, make sure that you're part of a union, because there's certain behaviors that you don't have to tolerate. Okay. So number one, that's the first thing. Now, what I would say to you, to this cover supervisor or this particular individual, is that there's two ways, or there's two branches of thought here to deal with this. So what I would say is that there's two. So there's what I call short-term fixes. Okay. So if this cover supervisor, is watching this, this is what, 7:40, and they've got a class tomorrow. Okay. They've got a class tomorrow and they're dreading it. And they're like, Carl, just tell me what to do. How can you help me? There's what I call a few short-term hacks, and then there's a longer hack that you need to think about. But in order to understand this, to explain this hack, I need to explain a particular concept to you. So in my first book, I talk about the classroom management, spectrum, right? Everybody's on this spectrum, right? The classroom management spectrum, every single teacher. So there's 500,000 teachers that are in the UK at the moment, from what I know. All right. And every single teacher falls on this spectrum. So the spectrum has two parts to it. One part, or one half, is what we call authority. All right. Authority, classroom management, right? So authority is, so if I define authority to you, authority is the ability to make somebody do as you say. Okay. So authority, and I'll break down what authority means in a minute, but authority in its basis is the ability to command respect and to get people to do your bidding. Okay. So if a policeman stops me in the car and says, get out of the car, okay, he has the legal authority to do so. Okay. That's one part of classroom management. The other part of classroom management, or the other branch, is what I call warmth. And warmth is basically goodwill. It's the ability to build rapport with your students, to have, to engage with them, to get buy-in, to build those classroom relationships. Now, what I argue to be good at classroom management is that you need to have both of these wings. You need to have both of these parts. So what I talk about in the classroom management, the Action Hero Teacher Classroom Management Made Simple, and I talk about this in Action Hero Teacher 2, Teachers of the Last Class, is I say that there's something what I call the leadership zone, right? So the leadership zone is in the middle. The best teachers that I know who are great at classroom management have equal parts authority and equal parts warmth, okay? Now, what I would say to this cover supervisor is that looking at what you've got here, you've got basically a situation where you need to show your authority, but also try and build up those relationships with those young people. Now, I don't know the circumstances, because I presume that maybe he could be just going in. So I presume with a cover supervisor, he might not be seeing the same class every day. Okay. He might walk into he or she or them might be walking in a situation where they don't know the classes that they're dealing with. But I'm going to take the presumption that they're in the same school. okay, that they stay in the same school. They're not doing day-to-day supply in different schools. So it's possible to build up those relationships, especially if you're doing this day in and day out, okay? So how do we build up our authority and how do we build up our warmth? So these are the short-term hacks, all right? So number one, what I'd say to this cover supervisor is this. We've got to get our tone and our body language correct, all right? That is the first step. Now, there's a guy called Dr. Albert Marabian, who was, I believe, a psychologist or sociologist. I think he was a psychologist. You know, quote me, put it in the comments. If somebody's on Google right now, look up Dr. Albert Marabian, okay? All right. But I believe he was a psychologist. And in the 70s, he came up with this very interesting proposal about communication, or hypothesis, should I say. And he was looking at how communication is received amongst humans. And what he said, what he came up with was a rule called the 7-38-55% rule. So when humans are communicating with each other, what he posited was 7% is down to our words. All right. It's just literally down to what we say. Right. 38% is down to our tone. And 55% is down to our body language. So let me say it again. 7% is down to the actual words that you're saying. 38% is down to your tone. And 55% is down to your body language. Now, many people have argued and said, you know, he's talking rubbish. He's actually 20% or this and that. But I do think the spirit of the rule applies, right? Communication is more than just speaking or talking, right? That's what communication is more than just doing that. So I'll give you an example. If I was at a party and I saw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, very handsome guy, and he's smiling at me, and he said to me, "Carl, can I talk to you outside?" And he said it that way, "Carl, can I talk to you outside?" I might be thinking, yeah, I'm going to get a movie deal. Mom, I've made it. You know what I mean? I'm getting a movie deal. Okay. But if that same night I saw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he's looking really angry and he's staring at me, he's eyeballing me, and he comes to me and he says to me, "Carl, can I talk to you outside?" Or "Come outside." Now, the words are similar, but the body language and the tone completely change the meaning. Okay. So it's really important that we get that right. And so many people miss that. And when you do your initial teacher training, so many people don't talk about body language, right? So here are a couple of quick hacks. Number one, what I want you to do, this cover supervisor to do, is number one, or any person that's in a difficult situation like this. Number one, I want you to slow down your reaction time. Slow your reaction time down. All right. I want you to respond rather than react. And it's very simple. If you are in a tense situation, all right, the first thing, if a child's being rude to you, what is our natural instinct? We want to shout back, or we want to get really irate and really angry. What I want you to do is I want you to add 2 to 5 seconds to your reaction time. And what I usually do is I used to take a deep breath. Now, you might think to yourself, what the hell is a deep breath going to do? It does a lot, actually. All right. So if a kid say, "Shut up, I don't want to talk to you," I'd say. Now, that deep breath, number one, gives you time to regulate yourself. All right. Because what you don't want to do is become emotionally dysregulated. So you've already got a young person who's dysregulated. And then if you start getting dysregulated, so who are you talking to about shut up, blah, 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 that becomes a big problem. You're pouring fuel onto the fire. So number one, you need to calm yourself down, get yourself regulated. All right. Number two, what I always used to remember was the calmest person in the room wins. All right. I always used to think that way. If I start shouting and screaming, it doesn't show that I'm in control. It shows that I'm out of control. So add 2 to 5 seconds to reaction time. Take that breath to regulate yourself. Number two, I want you to lower your tone. All right. So when you're talking to a young person or you're talking to someone who's dysregulated, the worst thing you could do is start getting irate. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. Okay. So lower your tone slightly and talk about 20% slower. Right. I learned this trick from Bruce Willis, actually, from a book I read about Bruce Willis, but we haven't got time to go into it. But I call this the Bruce Willis technique. So if you've got a young person, so if the young person's not taking off their jacket, I could say, "John, take off your jacket," right? Or I could say, "John, take off your jacket." There's a different energy, and that shows a lot more control. Number two, okay, what I would say to that to the cover supervisor is try to smile. Okay, I know it sounds nuts. You're like, "Carl, how can you be smiling when someone's swearing at you or throwing a chair?" Of course, if they throw a chair at you or they try and shoot you, I'm not telling you to smile at that. There's nothing you could do about that. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you want to either smile or keep a neutral face. Why? Because that shows confidence. If you're scowling and growling at them, all right, it shows that you've lost control. So either keep a neutral face or I want you to smile. In fact, if you look at some of the scariest people, so there's a show I used to watch, and put this in the comment if you've ever watched the show, called Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad. Anybody watch that? Right? Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. And there was a character called Gus Fring in there, all right? And he was like a gangster. He ran a chicken shop, but he was a gangster on the side, okay? It sounds crazy, but once you watch the show, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And what was really interesting, chicken shop gangster. Yeah, absolutely. He was a chicken shop gangster. So what I understood about Gus, or what was interesting about Gus Fring, is that you had all these cartel bosses who would scream and shout and rage and make lots of noise, but Gus was always calm. He hardly ever raised his voice. Okay, he always spoke in a very measured tone, and that was what was frightening, and it shows a lot more confidence as well. So you're going to add 2 to 5 seconds to your reaction time, lower your tone, talk slightly slower. And what I'd say is that to this cover supervisor as well, and this is the last hack I'd say for the time given to me, is I would say you have to be a master of what I call pleasure stacking and pain stacking. What does that mean? Now, if you get the low level disruption toolkit, I talk about it there. And I also talk about it on the Classroom Management Black Belt course. And what that basically means is you need to frame your conversations, or frame it in a way which will pull out an emotion or pull out a certain emotion. Okay. Because the thing is, if we just give our instructions and we expect our young people to follow the logic of that instruction, okay, we're fighting a losing battle. Now, I don't know if you've realized, but our young people are not that mature yet. So they tend to think through their amygdala. They tend to think through their, what is known as their emotional mind. They don't tend to use their neocortex. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that we're framing our messages in a way which will provoke a certain reaction, right? It provokes a certain reaction to make them stop and to make them think. What does that look like? So if I've got a young person who's being really rude to me, okay, he's being really, really rude, and I tell him to take off the jacket and he's saying, no, I'm not taking off the jacket, I would say this. Okay, so the usual response, if you don't take off the jacket, you're getting a 20-minute detention. Young person might say, I don't care. Give me the detention then. This is what I would say. I'll say, look, young man, young lady, young person, look, I don't want to give you this detention, but if I'm forced to give you this detention, then what I'll have to do is, this is what will happen. If I give you a 20-minute detention, that means your parents are going to get called. That means, you're going to get 20-minute detention after school. That possibly means you might miss football practice or not be able to go to this club. Your parents going to be really annoyed with you. This is going to happen and that's going to happen. Now, notice that I'm saying it in a calm way as well. Okay, I'm saying it in a really calm way. That's important to understand. When you're doing these techniques, always try and do it in a calm way. All right. So what you want to do is you want to walk them through what the actual consequence means. So that's pain stacking. That's one half of it. Another half of it is what I call pleasure stacking. So I would say in the same conversation, look, if you take off your jacket, then, you get to go to break time on time. You get to do this, you get to do that. You get to be with your mates. You get to play football. You get to do basketball. You get to eat your chocolate biscuit or whatever you want to do. And you get to go home on time. Which one sounds more appealing? And then what I'll probably say is, look, it's your choice, but which one sounds more appealing? So what I've done is I've painted a picture of all the consequences and where that leads to, right? A negative picture, but I've also done a positive picture and I've spelled it out for them. So when you get used to, it's called emotional framing. When you get good at framing your messages in that way, you become more persuasive and you become more charismatic. And where I learned that from was public speaking. If you look at what the best politicians are able to do, they pain stack and they pleasure stack quite often in their speeches. I can't think of any speeches. Yes, we can, by Barack Obama. They tend to do that. Even someone like Donald Trump, who's very controversial, is very good at that technique. And that's a public speaking technique. So learn how to frame your messages in an emotional way. So those are my little hacks: body language, tone, the ability to frame your messages. But what I'd say in the long term, what you do need to, so I know the person, the individual said, this is the real world and I want some real advice. You've got to be able to set some ground rules. You've got to be able to have that conversation with your class, set those ground rules and say, look, we're not having a good time in this class. What can we do going forward? Okay. That is really important to do. Now, for time, I can't go through all of that, but that is in the Action Area Teacher 1, where I've got a whole chapter dedicated to how to set effective ground rules, right? So that not only are you just, it's not just you dictating to them, it's them absorbing that as well. So I really went to town on this question, but I really wanted to help this person because this person sounded quite upset. So hopefully, if they're watching on the playback, I've given you enough ideas, and feel free to contact me as well. All right, so let's keep on going. Learn how to work with or deal with disengaged families where negative behavior is accepted and therefore a normal type of learning how to work and deal with disengaged families where negative behavior is accepted and therefore a normal type of behavior to the student. I think I know what the question is. So how do you deal with, so if you've got a particularly challenging pupil where you just call home and the parent could be potentially hostile, or they've accepted that behavior, or say, it's all right, my Johnny, is you're the problem with the teacher. How do you deal with that? Now, that's extremely challenging. Whoever sent that to me, that's extremely challenging to do. Okay. Now, first things first, a quick fire tip. When you are calling, what I want you to understand, ladies, gentlemen, and people who are watching this live stream or watching the playback, is that we're in a crisis. We're in a very difficult time, all right, as a society and as a world. I don't know if you watch the news, but it's not very happy on the news. Okay. So what is more pertinent is that we're dealing with a cost of living crisis, right? So why is that relevant? Because most of us are stressed. Unless you are a billionaire or multimillionaire, most people are stressed. They're worried about their bills. They're worried about how to heat their home. They're worried if they can feed their children. They're worried how to pay the mortgage and rent. And unfortunately, these same worries will filter down from the parents into the kids. So that is why I've gone up and down the country, all the way from Manchester to Devon. And every time I speak to head teachers and staff, they say the behavior post-COVID has got worse. So we have to factor that into our teaching and factor those stresses in. All right. So always keep that in mind. So that's one thing. What I always say is that you have to get the parents on side. You have to. So when I used to talk to parents, the first thing I used to say, especially if I knew it was going to be a difficult conversation, or I knew they've not had the best time with their young person. And sometimes we've got to remember schools. I remember there was a particular young person whose parent was getting called 10 to 15 times a day. Now, imagine being the parent of that young person. You are at work, you're trying to focus on your job, and then the school is calling 15 to 20 times. Okay. And it's always something bad. All right. Now, I'm not excusing the young person and I'm not excusing the parent, but what the key thing is that we have to think about is that we have to think in terms of, we have to empathize. So one of the first things I always used to do was I always used to say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am, this is Mr. Poupe. I am on your side. So after we've done the pleasantries, I would say something along the lines of, we're on the same team. I want the best for your young person. I want the best for that young person, and I want them to do well in school. And mom, dad, I want to help you. Now, it sounds really simple, right? And most of these tips are, but it changes the energy of the conversation. If you start the conversation with little Johnny or little Megan, they flipped over a table, they spat at a teacher, they're horrible, they're demons, they're demon spawn that have been sent from the pits of hell to destroy the classroom, we hate them. And I've heard some teacher conversations. I used to be a manager, so I used to coach. How is that energy going to be conducive to finding a solution? Okay. So I always started off with by saying, me and you are on the same side. Okay. Now, there was a technique, and I've put this in the Action Area Teacher 1, which I called heat. Right. And I developed this with my team to have these types of conversations. Now, I used to do a lot of interventions. Okay. I used to do a lot of interventions where there were kids that were excluded and they needed to come back into mainstream, or, panel meetings where we're talking about exclusion cases and how to help. And what we devised is something called heat. Now, you might not be doing exclusions. You might not be doing, panel meetings, but you can always add a bit of this heat into your conversation. So what does HEAT stand for? HEAT stands for holistic, educational, aspirational, and targeted. Let me put my fingers back into the camera here. Holistic, educational, aspirational, and targeted. So whenever I had these tricky conversations, I'll go through these steps. So what does it mean? Holistic, number one. So when you're speaking to a parent, I'll always say, how is Johnny? How's Johnny's life? How is everything okay? As you know, obviously for safe, if there's something that happens which, you know, they disclose some particular difficulty and it's a safeguarding risk, then of course I'll speak to my DSL, designated safeguarding lead, so on and so forth. But I always said, how is Johnny? How's life? Right? And you ask the parents and you ask the young person, if possible, how's it going? And what you sometimes find by asking that simple question is that they might, especially if you're dealing with vulnerable young people, they might say, look, I hate school and I've moved from another school and I don't have friends, and so on and so forth. So it gives you context to be able to talk to that young person. That's number one. Holistic. Educational. I have a conversation about their education. And again, these are all questions you can speak to the parents. And you've got to understand as well, the parents might have educational trauma. So I'd say, look, how's he doing in school? How's his grades? Go through his reports. Okay. So it might look like, if you're a history teacher, you're teaching Johnny or Megan or, you know, Ben, you just say, look, Ben's not doing well at this, but he's doing well at that. All right. So educational, right? How's he doing in his education? Aspirational. This is so important. This is the sugar in the medicine. This is the sweetener. All right. What could Johnny or Megan do? Okay. So if you've got, and another thing we always forget sometimes is that every single student has a superpower. They've got an ability, they've got a particular strength. And what I've seen great teachers do, people that have got great behavior management skills, is they are able to draw that out. So if you've got a child, for example, who's a bit of the top boy and he's walking around the school, or she's the top girl, I say you've got leadership skills, you've got communication skills, because you're able to get these people to buy into you, right? So I always try to speak of something aspirational, something positive, saying, look, okay, he might not be good at his history, but he raises his hand in class, and I'm convinced that with this skill he can do this, and this. Okay, this is what he can do. If we can get him up to here, if we can get him to pass, then he's got another GCSE. If we can do this, then he can become a lawyer. He could do something positive to the parent. And then the last one is targeted. Okay, so targeted. So I'll say, Mum, Dad, look, we've had a conversation. All these things have happened. Well, let's put a target down. What can Johnny do? Okay, so Johnny is not showing up to class. Let's make him show up to class 4 times a week, or let's do this. Let's see if Johnny can cope with this. Let's make these adjustments. And then you agree, or you speak to the parent or the carer and say, look, this is what he can do. This is what he can't do. See what the barriers are and try to remove them, and set a target which is fair. If you have a heat conversation with a parent, that will be a better outcome than you just ringing and saying Johnny is a demon sent from the pits of hell. Okay, that is a better conversation. Okay, so always apply a little bit of heat. All right, so I'll say it one more time: holistic, educational. Let me do it this way. No, bending up my elbow. Let me do it this way. Okay, all right, holistic, educational, aspirational, and targeted. All right, so when you're talking to parents, always think about heat. You might not go through all of the letters or the acronyms, but always think about it that way, and always try and convince the parents that you are on the same side as the student. Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you very much. Mid-level disruption from several pupils at once. So what if they are all misbehaving? What if they are all messing around? How do you deal with that? I'm sorry, this is a cop-out answer. 2 answers I've got for you. Number one, the low-level disruption toolkit talks about that. So if you are a subscriber to the Teach Outside the Robot newsletter, I've got a 40-minute seminar or 40-minute talk all about that. So you can go and look at that. And I'm really sorry to say, no, I'm not going to apologize. I'll say it with chest. I talk a bit about this on the Classroom Management Black Belt course as well. And these tips and tricks are transferable. Okay. What I want to do, so I've got level 1 of the Classroom Management Black Belt course, which is there. Fantastic, all good, great. But I want to talk more about group dynamics in level 2 and levels 3, and they should be coming out. I won't give you a date yet. I've got an idea of a date, but they will be coming out in 2025, and there'll be a lot more extensive courses, because there's an actual skill in how to manage a crowd and how to lead a crowd. So I'll talk more about that in the future courses. But for now, I talk about that in I'm even forgetting now. Teach Outside the Robot, Low-Level Disruption Toolkit, Classroom Management Black Belt, talk about it. And also the Action Area Teacher 2 books, talk about it a lot, because I know time is running out. So let's keep on going. So 2, what classroom management techniques would you like to learn about? Any techniques you've seen work in a practical setting. So I always said this when it came to any techniques that I taught in when I was doing consultancy or when I was leading my team. I call it the 2-minute rule. Okay, Any technique that you do in classroom management has to work within 2 minutes. Why do I say that? Because it's a simple calculation. Where I used to teach, where I developed this training, each lesson was 60 minutes, and usually you have 30 kids. So 60 divided by 30 is 2. You do not have hours upon hours to be able to deal with some kids. I remember taking a training, no word of a lie, where an educational psychologist was training the whole school, and the ed psych said, if the kid is playing up in your classroom, just take the kid out of the class, take him to play some basketball, and let him wait for him to calm down. And I'll never forget everyone's face in the hall, their mouths were aghast. Okay. And one of the teachers, a history teacher, put his hand up and he goes, what about the other 29 kids? So while you're taking this kid out to go and play basketball with him, it's going to become a Lord of the Flies situation back there. So I always said, any technique that you learn has to work in 2 minutes or less. And that's always been my mantra. So any of the techniques I teach, 95% to 95% of them will work in 2 minutes or less. So any techniques that you work with, and again, I talk about this in the Teach Outside the Robot newsletter, talk about this in Action Hero teacher books, talk about this in the classroom management black belt course. All those techniques should work in 2 minutes or less. That's really important. Handling mobile phone issues. Oh, that is a juicy one with 10 minutes to go. Handling mobile phone issues. Trying to take a mobile phone out of a young person's hand is trying to take it's like the equivalent of taking a gazelle out of a starved lion's mouth. Okay. Mobile phone issues are really, really difficult. This is where I would say I would go very much into the emotional framing, which I spoke about, which is pain stacking and pleasure stacking. So in the school I used to work in, I used to be on call. Some people call it patrol, some people call it on call, help, SOS. But I was the person that if you're having difficulties in your class, you would call me, and then I would come with my walkie-talkie and try and handle the situation. And I would say 50% of the calls were about mobile phones. And again, it was just a case of what I call pain stacking and pleasure stacking. So it was a case of getting the young person. So number one, I'll take them outside the room, because usually it'll be some form of shouting match. So I'm not giving my phone. And then I will go and say to the young man or the young lady or the young person, just say, look, go through the pain stacking. I'll say, look, Michael, if you don't hand over your phone to Miss, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get an hour and a half head teacher's detention on a Friday of all days, right? You're going to get an hour and a half detention on a Friday. Your parents are going to be called. I already know that you're on report. That means you're going to have to start report again on the thing. Really hitting those pain points. And then I'll reverse it and I say, look, and when you pleasure stack, it's sometimes about minimizing. I'll say, look, we're going to take your phone just for the day. You're going to get it at the end of the day, Michael. If you can last 2 or 3 hours, you shouldn't have your phone anyway. Let me take the phone. You get the 20-minute detention, and that'll be the end of it. So what you want to do in those situations is master how to frame those messages with the techniques that I've said. All right. So make sure you frame it by using what I've just taught you there. Anything and everything. Oh, you're such a charmer, whoever you are. Unknown person. I love it. Thank you very much. Haven't got any money to give you, I'm afraid, but thank you very much. Anything and everything. All right, so question 3, and we're down to the last 8 minutes. What would make your life easier when dealing with challenging behavior? Learning how to maintain the action hero techniques on a long-term scale. Great question. Fantastic question. Whoever sent this to me. And again, that's why I made the classroom management black belt course. So there's a whole section, which is the 3rd section or the 3rd pillar, which is called the study section, which I mentioned at the beginning. And what I wanted to do with that is to basically give you the tools to be able to reflect, do the exercises, and do the tips yourself without relying on someone like me. So it's basically like a coaching module. Okay. So my hope with that, and I'm really confident because I've done a lot of one-to-one coaching and I've seen this in action, is that the questions, the exercises, and the tips and tweaks will be able to give you those action hero techniques on a long-term scale. What I see is the biggest problem with a lot of people is that they get, the techniques, the tips, the tricks, but as and it's with all of us, right? Including myself, life takes over. Before you know it, you're forgetting bits and you're forgetting pieces of it. And you're like, what did Carl say? What did Paul say? What did Tracy say? What did this person say? So that's why another reason is, another thing I forgot to mention is that with the classroom management black belt course, you will get a handbook as well. So you have the notes in your hand, okay? And it's just about refining those techniques. So that's a very good question. And that was my hope for that. Let's go on to the next question. All right. And by the way, because I'm a respecter of time, we've got 6 minutes left. If anybody's got any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. Otherwise, after these questions, I will shut this down. Dun, dun, dun. It'll be shut down. All right. So what was the question again? Sorry, I'm forgetting. What would make your life easier dealing with challenging behavior? So the response was very simple checklist to print off and stick to a desk or drawer. Again, beating a dead horse here, but it's again in the classroom management black belt course. I do have a checklist and it does have some things in there you can take away and stick in a drawer. Now I am doing all I can, what I can, and going in the right direction. This is what I want to say. All right. For all the teachers, TAs, support staff, I might have social workers listening to this. I might have even parents listening to this. You're doing a fantastic job, the majority of you. If you're not locking up your kids and beating them to death, you're doing a fantastic job. Okay, I said that a bit flippantly, forgive me. But what I'm saying is that it's tough going out there. It is really tough going out there. And it's very easy to beat yourself up and say, am I doing well enough as a teacher, as a social worker, as a mentor? Am I doing well enough? All right. Do what you can in that day. It's hard graft when you're working, especially when you're working with young people who have got really challenging backgrounds and stories. It's hard graft. Make sure in everything that you're doing, you're looking after yourself. Okay. As long as you come with that, and you always, one of the things that one of the sayings that honestly was my North Star when I was a teacher was, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I think Eleanor Roosevelt, who was one of the first ladies, FDR, I believe, history teachers, let me know, I could be wrong, said that. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I always come with that attitude that if I show this young person that I do care about them, I do have positive regard, I do want them to do well, all right, that will push me in the right direction. There's some days I get it wrong. Stephen Covey, who was a motivational speaker, he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I believe. I could be wrong. No, I'm right. He wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, And one of the terms that I really loved was something called the emotional bank account. And he was referring to with your family and friends, but equally this can go with your relationships with other people. And what he basically said was that the more goodwill and the more rapport we build with people, and you know how nice we are to people, we build up something called an emotional bank account, and we keep on making deposits. So imagine, you know, using, I don't know, with a young person, just say you've got a young person in your classroom. Over the years, you're their form tutor and you're always complimenting them and saying great things. You build up a huge deposit. So if something goes wrong where you have to tell off the young person, or you have to call home, or you have to give it attention, although that's a minus, that's like taking money out, basically. All right. It's like taking some money out. It shouldn't empty the bank account. So if I've got £1,000 in there and I take £100, although I'm not happy about it, I've still got £900 in there, unless I do something really bad, okay, which empties the bank account. And I think it's the exact same thing when we're dealing with our young people. If you go with the attitude that I am doing the best I can, I'm going to show you that I do care about you, I want to show you that I want you to succeed, that is the best thing that you can do. That's the best thing for them. And I'm telling you, although sometimes, especially with our more vulnerable students, our SEMH students, it might feel that it's not working. I assure you it is. I assure you you're making those deposits. So that's a really good one. All right. So no questions have come in. Okay. I've spoke about this. So I'm going to close off in the last 2 minutes with these things. So thank you, first of all, for all those people who listen to this live. And thank you to the people that watch this on the playback. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking your time out, an hour of your time. And I know time is money, as they say, to watch this back. All right. So thank you both groups. So there are 3 ways I can help you. I've littered it throughout the whole conversation. Teach Outside the Robot newsletter, the Action Era teacher books, and the Classroom Management Black Belt series. And also you can just contact me as well. Drop me a message. All right, drop me a message. So as I said, fortnightly newsletter every second Thursday. You get the best tips, tricks, and strategies of being a classroom leader. I like to say classroom leader rather than classroom manager in the information age. It's absolutely free. head over to actionareateacher.com for more details. It's literally right at the top. Sign up for the newsletter. Each newsletter is designed to be 5 minutes or less, because I know how busy school life is. Sign up, get those tips, tricks, and strategies free. And there's lots of exciting collaborations I've got coming down the pipe. That's the first one. The second way I can help you is the Action Area Teacher Action Area Teacher books 1 and 2. They're all on Amazon. If you go and type in Action Hero Teacher, oh, another thing is they both carry high ratings, 4.7 out of 5 stars. So it's almost 4 stars for both books. They are Amazon exclusive. So if you head over to Amazon and type in Action Hero Teacher, they will come right up. And then, of course, what we're here for today, ladies, gentlemen, and people, is the Classroom Management Black Belt video series. I've said more than enough about it already, but it's been released today from 7 p.m. If you are one of the interest list or one of the people that were on the interest list, you would have received an early bird discount. So the course is retailing. I forgot to say the price of the course, of course. The course is retailing for £149. Okay. But if you are on the interest list, you got a third off, and the exclusive price is £99, but it'll only be until Friday. Now, if you are not on the interest list, I'll tell you what, because I'm in a good mood. If you're not on the interest list, you've missed that early bird discount. It's absolutely fine. Join up to the interest list. Send me an email as well, or send me a LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter. Just contact me and say, my name is John Smith. I've joined your interest list, and I'll manually send you a discount there. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, and people. I do appreciate you watching. Guys, keep it on the lookout. There's lots and lots of things coming down the pipe for Action Hero Teacher. I'm so excited to get to know all of you, just to get a handle on the socials. Did I put the socials? No, I didn't, because I'm a naughty boy. But basically, if you go to LinkedIn, put in my name, Carl Poupe. My name is here. If you see my name, you type in my name, Carl Poupe, I will appear there. All the other, I'll tell you where else I'm at. I am, so that's LinkedIn. I'm on Threads. So Threads is basically Facebook's Twitter or Instagram's Twitter. So Threads, THREADS. And if you type in Action Hero Teacher, you'll find me there. I'm on Twitter. Now, Twitter's slightly different. It's Action Hero Teach, because it wouldn't allow me to have the ER. You can find me there. And also you can contact me on my website. So if you go to my website, scroll all the way down, there's a contact me page there, and you can get all my details there. Now, thank you very much for your time. I'll let you resume your dinners. I'll let you go back to watching your Netflix shows. And honestly, it's been a pleasure. Hope you've got a lot out of it. And I'll see you all later. Peace.